Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to Buddhist Center. It feels so great to be with you here tonight, looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, specifically the foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good, that we know encompasses all of the stages of the path to enlightenment that are contained within the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, as well as the great treatise on the stages of the tantric path to enlightenment. So this 14 stanza poem that we've been looking at forever now is really just so beautiful, because when we learn the greater texts and look at them in the commentaries and so forth, we're able to see in each of these stanzas all the beauty that's really they represent. And we know that Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, many of our root lama, would always open the teachings and say, quote, Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. Understand that there are persons of three capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly to identify their individual characteristics or define them individually. And this 14 stanza poem is just a little bit more information about those three kind of capacities than that one stanza. And then we look at the abbreviated stages of the path to enlightenment, and it explains that one stanza a little bit more than the 14 stanzas, the Lamrim Duden. And then we get to the medium stage of the path to enlightenment, and it explains it even more. The couple hundred pages of Lama Tsongkhapa's writing explaining that one stanza about the persons of three capacities even more. And then we get to the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment that we're so fortunate to have in English in 3 volumes, where Lama Tsongkhapa expands very, very extensively on that one stanza, and then wrote the other text, the great treatise on the stages of the tantric path, to make sure that everything is included that would be included in the teachings for beings of three capacities. Because we know when we get to the teachings for beings of great capacity, this is the Mahayana teaching, and we have the perfection vehicle and the resultant vehicle. We have the perfection vehicle sutra teachings and the tantric vehicle teachings that are within that. And the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, the Lam Rim Chemo, has just a very, very tiny, tiny bit about Tantrayana right at the end, because Tantrayana and the 4 classes required a much greater amount of page material, and it wasn't really suitable to put all of those stages and so forth within the text of the Lam Rim Chemo that predominantly deals with the sutra path to enlightenment. So when we look at these 14 stanzas and we see how those 14 are built upon the one stanza of Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment, and what those 14 stanzas are summarizing in terms of Lama Tsongkhapa's greater body of work, I just really rejoice in having just an inkling of an understanding about these things because of the kindness of my perfect teachers, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, Demolocha Rinpoche, the Khyentse Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, and now the great Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche and Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche. We're just so fortunate to have this stream of information and the stream of oral tradition to be able to know how to change our minds and make our minds represent and make our minds in the aspect of, or have the qualities of, the minds that these teachings say are the best minds to have. So I know, in dependence upon the stages of the path, I can then realize the same things that others with a mind that is changeable have realized. So I look at my teacher, Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, and I know that he didn't hide anything from us. He showed us exactly what we needed to do and said, whether you do it or not, independent, he would always say. But he was very clear and concise about exactly what it was that we needed to do. And I feel fortunate that I was guided in that way in systematic studies and continue to engage in systematic studies within the Nalanda tradition in order to be able to be of most benefit to others. So before we go any further, let's begin by setting a really, really the best motivation that we can possibly muster up. And that would be that I want to attend this teaching, listen to this teaching, give this teaching, whatever, you're doing in this teaching, for the sake of all sentient beings, to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And it's incredible that when we look at the Bodhisattva path and we look at the Buddha that the Bodhisattva path produces, the Bodhisattva path is a pathway that puts others' needs before one's own, which is a pathway which is looking to do the next beneficial thing at all times, a mind that perpetually wishes to help others. And this mind knows that at any given moment on the Bodhisattva path, that once one generates the mind that aspires to enlightenment, one becomes a Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva knows at any given point on the Bodhisattva path, no matter where they are, if they aren't Buddhas, they are insufficient in some way. They aren't reliable in some way. And the Bodhisattva's goal is to help sentient beings, to help, the Bodhisattva's object of his or her compassion is all sentient beings. And the Bodhisattva recognized his or her unreliability up until the 10th Bodhisattva ground, because he or she still has the appearance of objective, intrinsic, inherent existence that's occurring at that level still, even though they have no longer the afflictive obstructions. They no longer have that self-grasping ignorance. They still have the appearance of true existence, which inhibits them from being the most reliable guides in the universe. So we see that the Bodhisattva ideal that we're trying to generate, this idea of wanting to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, is generated in the mind of a being who has decided there is nothing else that he or she can do in order to fulfill the goal that they have. And that goal is to bring all sentient beings to a state of happiness, where is the highest amount of happiness possible, and free all sentient beings from a state of suffering. And once one makes this declaration in one's own mind through various practices that the Buddha taught, one comes to this conclusion that the only way that one can fulfill one's aims and all sentient beings' aims is to become a Buddha. So this idea of wanting to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings is easy to say, but what that actually means and what the mind would be like of someone who has bodhicitta is so incredibly profound. It's someone, we throw around this idea of, oh, he or she is a bodhisattva. They're like bodhisattvas. But when we look at what a bodhisattva is, this is a being who day and night just perpetually wants to be a benefit to others and does not think about his or her own needs, is literally a helping machine that just is helping more and more and evolving themselves more and more and more to become the most efficient, most effective, most reliable helping machine possible, and that's Buddhahood. Buddha has removed all of the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, and those are the things that keep you from being the most reliable helping machine. And the Bodhisattva is only doing what he or she is doing once they generate bodhicitta, that's what makes them a Bodhisattva, in order to help others. So it makes the most sense, if all you want to do is help as many people as possible, to become the most adept at doing so. So the Bodhisattva day and night is trying to become a Buddha, not because they want to be a Buddha and be fancy and have bliss and all of this stuff. This comes with the job. But they want to, because of having practiced the things that we're learning about, having practiced equanimity and having practiced the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment and equalizing and exchanging self with others. They, as a result of having practiced all the steps that lead up in all those practices to the result of bodhicitta, have developed a mind that someone like myself can read about, but to fathom what it would be like to actually day and night be willing to put every single sentient being's needs in the universe before my own and be of most benefit to them, no matter by whatever means necessary. This is something that's very far from my way of thinking, but what I can do now is what every bodhisattva in the universe did before they became bodhisattvas, and that's create a mental basis that's concordant with the arisal of such a mind. Create a mental basis, create a habituation with thinking like that of a bodhisattva, And the Bodhisattva is creating habituation with thinking and ways and skillful means and powers, trying to create that which is just like a Buddha to be able to arise into a Buddha. So in order for us to, of course, become bodhisattvas, we have to first have renunciation. And all of these things that are the foundations in terms of the mental basis for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. But it's things like what we're doing right now, where we think about all sentient beings. And when we think about the merit field, and we think of the Buddhas who have realized these goals already, that we're putting into our mind the imprints that are concordant with those realizations. We're putting the merit field in front of us, not because they're gods in some way that they can remove our suffering or take away our pain or give us some special blessing or whisper a word in our ear and then samsara is over. We're imagining the merit field so that we can conclude and secure within our minds this first stanza of the source of all my good, the foundation of all good qualities. The source of all my good, the foundation of all good qualities is my kind Lama, my Lord. And that poem, the 14 stanza poem that encompasses everything that Buddha ever taught, that 14 stanza poem ends with, in all my lives, may I never be separated from my perfect lamas. So we start with this idea that we need to learn that the source of everything excellent is a teacher. Because if we want to get to Buddhahood, we need a teacher. We need someone to explain to us exactly how to get there. When we start to have weird things happen in meditation, be able to talk to them about whether this is accurate, inaccurate, is this something that should be happening, shouldn't be happening, what are the corrective measures? We know that from the outset of anything, we need a teacher. And as we reach subtler and subtler levels of spiritual realization, hopefully we will, if we're relying on a path that promises that that will happen, we are going to need the subtlest teachers possible to be able to help us along that path, to be able to eventually remove the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, and be the most reliable guides in the universe ourselves, be Buddhas ourselves. So we recognize that we need a teacher, and we pray that in this poem, may I never be separated from teachers. And when we look at this beginningless continuum of consciousness that has no end, samsara has no beginning, but has an end if we put a stop to it. If we create the opposing forces that stop samsara, we create a nirvana which has no end. And if we do so as bodhisattvas on the bodhisattva path and realize the path of no more learning, then we achieve what is called a non-abiding nirvana, a Buddhahood, where we are the most reliable beings in the universe with perfect love, compassion, skillful means, power, and a perfect wisdom. And when we look at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, it talks about the perfect kind of mind, this excellent quality of this mind that the Buddha has of being able to know reality and diversity, being able to know conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously, and then this excellent quality of caring for others. So just because you know everything, if you don't care about people, it doesn't really help. But if all you do is care that people have the most amount of happiness possible, you love them so much, and you have so much compassion for them, that you want them to have the most amount of happiness that's possible, and you're omniscient, then that makes for a very powerful, reliable being. Someone who isn't going to try to cheat you with their omniscience. Someone isn't going to try and cheat you with their cleverness. This is a being who can't do that, who can't try to do that, because he or she is a helping machine, a love, a being who only operates through the eyes of love, only operates through the eyes of compassion. And it isn't just a little bit of love or compassion that we experience full of attachment. It's one that's not biased, that has as its object of observation all sentient beings. So this is what we'll eventually have our minds turn into, a being whose mind wishes, to just help day and night, and eventually will be able to do that in the most reliable way possible once the bodhisattva path, the fruit of the bodhisattva path, is realized. The Bodhisattvahood causes Buddhahood. So we see that the fruit of the bodhisattva path is the Buddhahood. And that continuum, our mental continuum, will be the same continuum when we achieve Buddhahood. So these actions that we're doing right now are building staircases, if you will, that are climbing up into our spiritual realizations that eventually get to the level of perfection, according to Buddhism, where there's no more afflictive obstructions that keep us in samsara. Those have been removed. And there's no longer obstructions to omniscience that keep us from being the most reliable guides in the universe. And that, for that type of being, the subtle self-cherishing attitude is removed, which is part of those stains that are called obstructions to omniscience. And as soon as that's removed, if there's no subtleness even there to the self-cherishing, because if we look at the hero solitary realizer nirvana, we know that they achieve that goal in a kind of selfish way in some sense. They were thinking about an individual goal instead of a goal for everyone, for the sake of all. So there's a subtle, even though the self-grasping ignorance is removed and the gross self-cherishing attitude's removed, the subtle self-cherishing attitude is not removed for that being. And that's part of the kind of mixed blend that keeps them from seeing things the way they really are, and conventionally is seeing things as still appearing as inherently existent. So it's a lot of work, but it's work that's worth it, because it's work that if we do it in a systematic way, and we are really honest with ourselves, and we don't have self-deception and try and rely upon kind of woo-woo thinking and understandings that aren't grounded in any kind of logic or reality. If we're honest with ourselves and we practice these things step by step, the way that these great masters have practiced them step by step, we'll have the realizations that they've had. Doesn't mean overnight. It means year after year, 5 years, decade after decade of practicing this stuff. Things will actually occur that will confirm that these teachings are accurate. And it doesn't take generating bodhicitta and becoming a bodhisattva to conclude within your own mind that these teachings are accurate. You can see by applying them that there'll be a difference in your external behavior, because your mind will be behaving differently and will be kind of ordering up different services from your speech and from your body and so forth. So this is a huge evolution that we all will go through and can go through, and shouldn't cut ourselves short, because right now we have this human basis that's so precious. Let's take this essence of this human basis and let's do the most we can with this moment. And let's try to say, I'm doing this to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Now, with that being said, let's just imagine the merit field and the space in front of us. As I was saying, in all of our lives, we want to connect with beings. We want to connect with accurate information. There's so much inaccurate information out there, and there's so many on every corner. Someone will tell you something is the truth. But you will find out, if you analyze those things which are not the truth, they will come up short and won't be the truth. When you subject these things to ultimate analysis, and you subject them to logic and reasoning, and you subject them to what the Buddha said we should subject things to, they won't wash. They won't be accurate. And you can spend a whole lot of time wasting your time. But what we're trying to do is have our minds be so penetrated by this information, be so penetrated by this idea of refuge, that in our future lives, if we're presented with charlatan type teachings, we won't even have had to have picked up a book of any of these masters we're talking about. When we talk about the merit field, we'll just have a doubt right away and dismiss kind of crazy philosophies, and we won't pick up the acquired wrong philosophical views that are only undone at the path of seeing if we get them. So it's kind of a mess if we get messed up in this life. To undo the acquired wrong philosophical views is not a simple task. It's something that takes a lot of undoing to make it undone. So we're trying to think of these beings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineage and the lineage of blessings and all of the four types of Tibetan Buddhism, the Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, Gelug, and then the Bon tradition, and then thinking about the different levels of tantric deities and so forth, highest yoga, tantra, yogic, performance and action tantra, not because we're trying to create a mystical experience for our evening. That's great if that happens and it gives you more faith, but we're using logic and reasoning here. We're saying, why are we doing this? Why are we imagining the merit field? We're imagining this merit field because we want to remember that the source of all of our good, this foundation of every good quality that I have, is a good teacher. And I want to make sure I connect with good teachers. Who are good teachers? The teachers like Lord Maitreya and Arya Sangha and Master Basu Bandhu, and teachers like, Arya Manjushri and Arya Nagarjuna and Master Chandrakirti and Master Buddha Palita and Master Shantideva and so forth. And, Jetsun Milarepa, beings who talk and say things like them. Those are the beings that I want to connect with in all of my lives. I want to concrete this in my mind, because what all of these beings in the extensive deeds, profound view lineage and lineage of blessings and so forth teach are the things that I will need to know undoubtedly to become a Buddha on my pathway. So I might as well make sure that my mind knows where the information is that I seek. And then in future lives, I'll very easily maybe pick up a book by Master Hari Bhadra Arya Vimuktasena on the Prajnaparamita, on the Abhisamalamkara, and say, oh, okay, this is something that's important. This is something that I really, really should read. And then that may be, maybe I'm a small child, or that may be the thing that, sparks my path again to kind of pick up where I left off, and I won't have to waste a lot of time. So if this idea of future lives is true, and leaving imprints is true, and leaving causes that are concordant with results is true, and creating karma arrives in environmental ways and causally concordant ways and behavioral ways, if my karma that I'm creating now is going to create behavioral concordant things and kind of philosophically concordant things, and an environment that maybe in some way might be an environment where these teachings are, I've got to try to leave seeds in my mind that tell my mind, give it some sort of direction. If that makes any sense. I'm just trying to give my mind more and more roadmaps to Buddhahood, more and more of a shot. And the way that I do that is to tell my mind, I want to be like these beings. These beings are Buddhas. These beings became Buddhas by being Bodhisattvas. I want to become a Bodhisattva because I want to become a Buddha. This is what we're trying to do here. This isn't some kind of like mystical weirdo stuff. This is logic and reasoning. We went over the last couple of teachings, proving past lives with logic and reasoning, using syllogisms, using subjects, predicates, reasons, illustrations, showing, property of subjects and forward and reverse pervasions, and proving that this idea of past lives makes sense based on consciousness. Now, if this is the case, what we're proving makes sense, and cause and effect is true because we know cause and effect is true, then we ought to be trying to create causes for a future we want. We are the masters of our future. This is what the Buddha came to tell us. We're the ones who get to create what our future looks like because of cause and effect. All phenomena arise from causes. The causes are taught by the Tathagata. The cessation of causes as well are taught by the great seer. That's what the Buddha came to tell us. Your future is in your hands. Whatever you want to be a king, you want to have a lot of cars and nice fancy stuff, here, just engage in generosity and have ethical behavior. You'll have these enjoyments. That doesn't mean those enjoyments are going to last. That's samsara. But the Buddha told us how to get everything that we want. And when we're honest with ourselves and we study what the possible things are that we could have, we come to find out what we thought we wanted might not be exactly what we want, because we have a kind of higher way of thinking about it and a higher kind of goal and prospect, because we've learned that we should think of ourselves higher than we already do. We should, in a realistic sense, meaning that we have Buddha nature. Yes, we have these stains and afflictions and dirty parts of our mind, but we have a mind that's pure in the nature of clear light and unsullied, that's not stained, that just needs these adventitious defilements removed from it. And we have a pathway which creates that cessation, which creates that separation. because we engage in that which abandons step by step by step, that which keeps us from nirvana. We're only experiencing samsara because we haven't removed that which is allowing us to perceive nirvana. So imagine the merit field in the space in front of you, with all of the, imagining Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of you, imagining Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, imagining Demolocho Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang Gombo Rinpoche, imagining Khenso Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche, Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche, imagining beings like Jeffrey Hopkins Rinpoche, all the beings that you consider in your life, holy enlightened beings, imagining the beings of the extensive deeds lineage and profound view lineages of the Nalanda tradition and the lineage of blessings, these incredible Mahasiddhis and so forth. Imagining all of the holy beings of the Tibetan tradition, and imagining just any of these beings of the highest yogic tantra, yogic tantra, performance, action tantra, 35 Buddhist protectors. Just imagine these beings are in the space in front of you in as much detail as you can. Why are you doing this? Again, to just create your mind so you have a connection. You know, I say, oh, highest yoga tantra, performance tantra, action tantra. These are the 4 classes of tantra. You will need tantra to become a Buddha. Without practicing the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, it's not possible to go from the 10th Bodhisattva ground to Buddhahood. You must practice the highest vehicle. But the highest vehicle has all of these things underneath it that have to be practiced. And quite frankly, when we look at the lower classes of Tantra, we look at action Tantra in particular, it's more realistic, to fake than some of the higher ones. When we look at trying to create contrived states of mind to make connections to these teachings. And I won't go into much more than that, but when you look at the just difficulty and complexity of the higher tantras, you'll see that you will systematically need to upgrade your levels of subtlety in order to really make any use of those teachings. And not that I've done so, but I have just such an affinity for doing so, that I will one day do so, because I'm engaging in the stages in a systematic way that actually work, and using the Lam Rim as a reflection, as a mirror to see if it's working or not, and see if my mind's starting to cooperate with the teachings, if you will. Cooperate with reality is really the way to say it. So imagining the merit field in the space in front of you, and imagine that they're serving as your confidence builder, that these beings are here. Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche came into my life, and we spent 25 years almost together, as teacher, student, translator, etc. And wow, what an experience! What a blessing to be able to have just such an enlightened being in my life. I can't believe that such a thing occurred, and it isn't something that just occurs out of nowhere, and it isn't something that occurs all of the time. And I feel just so blessed to have been able to spend that many years with him, and be able to receive so many oral instructions and instructions about this stuff, that really, really, I rejoice in. So I'm sorry I lost my place a little bit, if there was a place. I start thinking about Rinpoche and I just get a little bit emotional, because I miss him so much, even though he's in everywhere, and I think of him every day. And in some ways I feel closer to him now than I ever did. But I do miss hanging out with my friend, teacher, Root Lama, who I saw as inseparable from Tara, who was also the best friend that I ever had. So yeah, imagine that you're sharing this experience of being able to see these kind of beings and be able to connect with these kind of beings, with everybody in the universe, imagining that you're inviting them all here, using the skills and tools that we've been building on over and over again since Rinpoche really passed, going over Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, looking at bodhicitta, and now this kind of hardcore, kind of in-depth look into each of these different steps that we've been doing in terms of, so far, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So bring all of your tools here. And we know from all of our studies that we should be first starting with inviting beings and dealing with beings in our bodhicitta meditation that actually exist. And the suggestion is that we begin with friends and then move on to neutrals and then move on to difficult people, and then fill in all other types of beings. When we look at the different commentaries we've gone over, and when we first do the practice of just generating equanimity, we do it in a different way. We do first neutral beings and then friends, then difficult beings. But then when we move on to this idea of bodhicitta, it moves on to, thinking about friends and then neutrals and then difficult beings. So however you want to do it, whatever's most effective for you. If you're working on equanimity and you're inviting all sentient beings time and time again into your practice, into the teachings, into your prostrations, you can invite them in the order that seems fit in dependence upon your studies, knowing whether or not you need work on equanimity and how that works. And then relating with beings that way, and then being able to invite them in a stronger way, or whether or not you've kind of moved from that and you can work on them then in a non-biased way, but still seeing if your equanimity is holding up by doing the different categories of beings. So these are all meant to just change our minds in a way that is moving towards that effective state of mind, of the main mind called bodhicitta. And then this wisdom realizing emptiness. All of these things are just working towards those goals of this union of method and wisdom, of realizing emptiness and bodhicitta. So this is what we're doing. So inviting all sentient beings here, hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods. Obviously, beginning with humans and animals, because Kamala Shila says, begin with beings you actually know. Make this effective. Make it someone you really dislike when you invite someone you dislike, and see how your mind feels, and see if it feels just as good as when you invited your daughter or your wife or husband or your best friend, etc., or son, whatever, see if it feels the same way. And for most of us, it doesn't. And that's why we need to do these exercises and work on our minds within the Lam Rim and work on these things over and over and over again, because no one with bias ever became a bodhisattva, and no one with bias ever became a Buddha. So if we look at that statement that's made over and over in the Lam Rim, then we see that if our minds don't feel the same way about everyone in terms of an equal willingness to help, then that's a problem that's keeping us from even being able to realize the first step of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So we've invited all sentient beings here. We imagine that the whole merit field is here kind of as our confidence builder, knowing that, hey, we can be like you. We can do exactly what you did and achieve the realizations that you've done. And luckily, all of you have written books and you have videos and so forth. And there's the Kangjur and the Tanjur, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha and the authentic Indian commentaries. Those are the folks we're talking about in the merit field, those writers, the Buddha and the authentic Indian commentators, and then the holy beings of the Tibetan tradition who've written books. And then these teachers that we've had contact with. And now we're so fortunate there's video. We can see videos of our teachings, we've been watching Namgyo Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche's teachings starting the beginning of the Lam Rim. And it's been so fun, and it's been so nice. And I plan on doing the whole Lam Rim series again, and just seeing, because I know I miss things with translation, and I'll bring things as I go through them to you that I find interesting. So imagine now that this merit field that we've thought about is transformed into Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain. We're setting the scene of the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. We know that the Buddha, when we look at the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. We know that the first turning of the wheel of Dharma occurred in Varanasi, Sarnath, where the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. It said, this is the superior truth of suffering. This is the superior truth of origin. This is the superior truth of cessation. And this is the superior truth of path. And then the Buddha said that the suffering is to be identified, and that origin is to be abandoned, cessation to be achieved, and path to be meditated upon. And then the Buddha said something peculiar and said there is no suffering to identify, there is no origin to abandon, there is no cessation to achieve or attain, and there is no path to rely upon. And that last set of statements means different things to different people, because the target audience at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma were the practitioners of the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika tradition. And the Vaibhashika tradition is primarily the tradition that we know now as the Pali tradition. That, when we look at the transmission of Buddha's teachings, we have the Pali tradition, we have the Dharmagupta tradition, and we have the Mulasarvastivadi tradition that the Tibetan tradition falls under. And when we look at the Pali tradition, that tradition, there were 18 schools of the Vaibhashika school that split. The Vaibhashika school split into 18 schools. And most of those teachings are what we find in the Pali tradition. So what that third set of statements means to practitioners who were the target audience of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma is that once you, achieve nirvana, there is no suffering to identify, there is no origin to abandon, a cessation to achieve, or no path to rely upon. But so that's what the target audience of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma comes to understand that means. And they come to understand that selflessness means the selflessness of person. And what does that mean? That there is not a selfhood of a permanent unitary independent self. There is not a self that is autonomously substantially existent, a self of person that is autonomous, substantially existent, has autonomous substantial existence. So the selflessness for them meant that about the person. And this is what that third statement at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma of the Four Noble Truths meant to that target audience. But then the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha teaches full emptiness, teaches the emptiness of inherent existence. And he made statements at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma where he even said that the Four Noble Truths are truly existent. They exist truly. And these are teachings that disseminated in the what we would call the Pali tradition. So you can understand why there would be this reluctancy to say that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence if the lineage of your tradition is from the target audience of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. So you can see how this confusion can take place. And then there's the Dharmagupta tradition that primarily goes to China and other places. And then the Mulasarvastivadi tradition, the Sanskrit traditions that the Mulasarvastivadi tradition, that then we have sutra and tantra teachings and the full essence of all of the Buddhist doctrine from the Vaibhashika school all the way up to the Madhyamaka school. So the second turning of the wheel of Dharma is the Heart Sutra at Vulture Peak Mountain, Rajagriha. So if we look at the emptiness that's taught in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, we look at the dependent origination, the subtle dependent origination that's being pronounced when we come to find out what the mode of existence actually is at a subtle conventional level. We find its subjective existence. So the second turning of the wheel of Dharma undoes some things that the Buddha presented. And this is why the Buddha said, make sure, like a goldsmith, you cut and rub my teachings and check them. Because the Buddha taught to scope. The Buddha was the most compassionate being in the universe, giving people what they needed at that moment. And he knew he went around for all of those years and was going to go around for many years and teach whatever was the most helpful thing to each and every being. And sometimes he taught the highest thing. And sometimes he said there was a self-carrying aggregates around. So we have to be willing to say the Buddha said a range of things for a range of people, and we can only use our own logic and reasoning and cut and rub as the Buddha said to see what is the final view. What could be said is the ultimate truth. So the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, as Prasangika, the Madhyamaka Prasangika view would say, this is the definitive teaching. This is where the Buddha meant what he said, that there is no inherently existent eye, ear, nose, tongue, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering. There is no inherently existent any of that stuff. There's no truly existent any of that stuff. There's nothing in the universe, including your mind or the Buddha, that it's truly existent, that is inherently existent, that isn't merely imputed in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation for a designated object. There's a designated object, and that it's merely a subjective thought designation. Rinpoche used to say, "Dopi datsan la dene," in dependence upon a designating, imputing mind. That's it. All of these things in the world come into being in dependence upon an imputing mind, and there is nothing from the side of the object of any phenomenon in the universe that can be found that's separate, identifiable, independent of a mere designating mind, as this mere designation of this or that. So this was a really profound thing that the Buddha came to say. But the most important thing that we need to know before we read the Heart Sutra is, one, that do things exist? Yes. Does the Heart Sutra say that phenomena does not exist? No. Well, do things exist the way that we think they do? Then the answer is no. Things exist, yes, but they don't exist the way that we think that they do. Then if they don't exist the way that we think they do, then how do they exist? And the way that we prove that things don't exist the way that we think they do is we subject them to ultimate analysis. And when we subject an inherently existent eye, ear, nose, tongue, Four Noble Truths, Buddha, to ultimate analysis, we will come up with a non-finding, because we will not be able to find an inherently existent Buddha or a car, inherently existent car, findably, intrinsically, within its parts or outside of its parts. And those are the only two options. We're not going to be able to find any other options in its parts, outside of its parts, depending on its parts depending on it possessing its parts, it being its collection of parts, its shape of its parts. We're not going to be able to, establish an inherently existent this or that unless we find it. It should be as findable as an elephant standing in a room, or as an olive in the palm of your hand if it exists. So when we subject anything to this ultimate analysis, we'll find that it comes up short and that it is not found to be inherently existent or truly existent. So we have to say that when we look at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, it must be definitive because it's invalidated by a valid cognition that things are truly existent besides the self of person, and that there are things that are truly existent is not valid, because it's invalidated by an ultimate valid cognition, observing the ultimate. So this is why we have to use our logic and reasoning. We can't just leave our brains at the door and just have this faith and say the universe and the space, and let's dissolve into the clear light and just say these things. We can do those things, but if we don't know what we're talking about at a very basic, rudimentary level, it's just talk. It's not helpful. It's more samsara. It's just a different club. It's just a different, these are my people's thing. if it's not getting at the root of cyclic existence. And that's the self-grasping ignorance that the Buddha came to tell us was our big problem in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. The Buddha said that everything that we apprehend and appears to our senses is appearing in a way that doesn't tally with reality. There's nothing wrong with flowers. There's a problem with inherently existent flowers. There's nothing wrong with shoes. There's a problem with inherently existent shoes. Inherently existent shoes don't exist. That's why when it says no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, it's not saying that those things don't exist. It's saying that when you look for inherently existence eyes and stuff like that, there'll be a non-finding. And that non-finding is the non-affirming negative, which is the realization, the object realized at the path of seeing, a non-affirming negative. It's not like, oh, well, then I know emptiness. No, you have a non-finding, which is an emptiness, which is a negative, which is a non-affirming negative, which is just a not. Is there an inherently existent shoe over there? Well, let me see. If I look, if it exists intrinsically in its parts, is it its laces? Is it its sole? Is it its rubber? Is it its leather? No, I don't. I have a non-finding within its part of an intrinsic existence within its parts. And then if I take and try to find an intrinsically existent shoe that's separate from its parts, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever either. I don't have anything there to designate because I have no basis of designation. So the way that I see those shoes over there is that there's something objectively existent. I don't see those shoes over there as something that I'm merely imputing, I'm merely designating in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation. I feel there's some shoes over there that exist from their own side. But when I subject those shoes to ultimate analysis, I find there's no shoe. Because the shoe that I was looking for, I thought inherently existed, objectively existed from its own side, separate from a merely imputing mind. So the kind of shoes I was looking for when I subjected it to ultimate analysis don't exist. So of course, when you come to this realization, there's just a non-finding. Shoes aren't there anymore. Because you were looking for something that doesn't exist. A shoe's mode of existence isn't objective existence. It's empty of inherent existence. A shoe's mode of existence is subjective, yet I think it's objective. The Buddha is so kind to us. Our teachers are so kind to us to be able to present things in such a clear fashion and show us how, in dependence upon this gross misapprehension of everything around me, in dependence upon me thinking things objectively exist, and I don't have any role in that whatsoever, in dependence upon that kind of thinking, I concretize things, and I say that thing is really attractive. That thing is really unattractive. And that kind of improper mental conduct that arises from this concretizing of things that comes from self-grasping ignorance, this concretizing of attractiveness, this concretizing of unattractiveness, this concretizing means that I think that there's an inherently existent attractiveness and an inherently existent unattractiveness. And that mental thinking, that process of thinking that says, oh, that which I find attractive is good feeling. That which I find unattractive is an unpleasant feeling. And then in dependence upon this inappropriate attention, I say, I must have that thing that's attractive, and I become attached. And I hate that thing that's unattractive, and I want to push it away from me. And in the process of this push and this pull, and the neutrality that's created when I don't see something as attractive or unattractive, but because of this continuum of ignorance, I see it as inherently existent and ready to go as soon as I become attracted to it or unattracted to it because I think it's inherently existent, and dependence upon this misperception that starts with self-grasping ignorance that turns into improper mental conduct that sees things as, oh, that's really attractive. Oh, that's really unattractive. Attachment arises, an aversion arises. Attachment or aversion sit in the cradle of self-grasping ignorance. They're not separable. If you have attachment and aversion, you have self-grasping ignorance there. It's the cradle of it. It's what brings it into being. It's the affliction, the subtle affliction of self-grasping ignorance and inappropriate attention gives rise to the coarse afflictions of attachment and aversion. And we know when we're attached, we behave badly. And when we have aversion, we behave badly. And that behavior is called action. Action is karma. So in dependence upon the afflictions we act, we create karma, and that karma leads to more samsara. And the reversal of it, the ceasing, as Arya Nagarjuna says in the Muya Madhyamika Karika, the ceasing of karma and afflictions is nirvana. Karma and afflictions arise from conceptuality of inappropriate attention, which in turn arises from elaborations of self-grasping ignorance. Elaborations cease into emptiness. Wow, we're so lucky, aren't we? To have this information, to be able to unpack it, understand what the Buddha was getting at, understand why it's so important, and then have commentaries to be able to see. I mean, there's, I think, 18 Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Double check that. A lot of Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And the Buddha taught them all at the same time, and people heard different lengths. The longest one being 100,000 verses, the shortest one being and all of them have, if you hear the commentaries, not only the definitive teaching on the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, but also hidden within it, the teaching on the liberating paths as well. Not just the ripening paths as well, not just the liberating paths. So we find within this hidden the 5 Mahayana paths, the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, path of meditation, and the path of no more learning, that have within them both the liberating and ripening paths. So hidden in the Heart Sutra, we find all of the things that are necessary: the path of accumulation, the small, medium, and great, the path of preparation of the heat, peak, patience, and the supreme dharma, the path of seeing with the uninterrupted path and the path of release, and the path of meditation with the uninterrupted paths and the path of release, and the abandonments at each levels of the path of seeing and meditation, the abandonments of the Bodhisattva levels that are occurring on the path of seeing and the path of meditation. All of this information is hidden within this sutra, and all of this information we will need to know because it's a pathway which we will traverse. It's not because we need to know it to be smart. It's because it's our owner's manual of, it's like, it tells us all about us, what we need to undo and what we need to do. It's like we were given a model when we were kids. We were make model airplanes and model cars and so forth. It's almost like a lot of times I would kind of fudge it because I wouldn't want to read the instructions, and I put the card and everything together kind of wrong. And it was all screwed up. And then I'd have no idea like what I had, because there were like 100,000 steps in order to get the thing just right. And I'd have no idea. It's almost like, the Buddha was so kind to come give us like the manual that shows, okay, this thing's all screwed up. Okay, now you got to remove this, and then you got to remove that. It's kind of showing us our mind, what's screwed up about our mind, what's going wrong and been going wrong since beginningless time. And then the Buddha very succinctly, carefully, when we look at how Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment shows us the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment, shows us succinctly in stages how to remove those things that are messed up in the model of my mind. So we're so fortunate. So let's recite this Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, imagining that all the beings in the universe are with us reciting this, and that we're at Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain. And to this week, I'm just going to kind of summarize what I've gone over the last couple of months related to the 7-point cause and effect. So we'll read the prayers now, and then we'll just get on with a couple of the things that I wanted to get done. We won't get all of the things I wanted to get done because I said I was going to have a short introduction this evening, which is now almost an hour long. So the plans of mice and men. But according to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the mice really knew what was going on. Okay, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way, saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of Prajnaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world of the gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Kala jube ne jo tamba ne ngushe du chu nga yi du do jen du ba bo lama yi bu shen zi ne sung kan so la cha se lo aga sam la de shan de ras. Aga samara de shandara samara be te ata on kate kate paragate parasangate buddhiso papa konchu sonji gaye dembe doji she lobo doji mebo doji shewa doji dragi baji mete bishe tanji she den kori so ageren don jaje she shewa da mitum nu be jen dan rawa dan ton ba jun jin bon son son joji dashi de jan den da de le sho. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay, let's read the source of all my good once through, and then we'll go right to the Mahayana section, the great vehicle section, the great scope section. And we'll just go over what we've gone over so far and make sure we've kind of concretized it in a non-inherently existent way in our minds, so that we can, ripen this. And I say that, all kidding aside, whenever we're doing practices, we should always seal it with emptiness. We have to make sure that we're keeping the perspective that things are not inherently existent. Because if we don't, then we can just reify what we're doing and begin to create another kind of samsara that just has different colors in it, different deities in it, different beings in it, kind of different ideas in it, kind of compassionate ideas that are kind of full of attachment and so forth. So we really have to try to keep our mind imbued with this idea of things being empty of inherent existence, because we know that the gross afflictions of attachment and aversion and pride and so forth sit in the cradle of self-grasping ignorance And the more we can tell our minds that, this kind of way of thinking doesn't tally with reality, the more we'll be moving towards a mind that only tallies with reality, and that's the Buddha's mind. So the source of all my good by Lama Tsongkhapa. And again, there's other translations of this. I really like this translation done by the Ken Rinpoche and the Art Engel group in New Jersey, Geshe Michael Roach group. I really love this translation. I love the poetry of it. And I know there's others, and everyone likes their different translations, but I find them all to have things about them I like better than the other ones, but this one I like the poetry of it. So I like to read this. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrong of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They can't be trusted. They're the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom, of liberation. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, every one my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I am not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant me that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I practice well, the path shared, and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then always to keep them, even if it costs my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now and could stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. So it's so important. Oh, okay, I have the puzzle. Let's see if I can do the puzzle. I've done the puzzle. Oh, I have to verify another puzzle? Hold on. Okay, verification has been sent that I'm not a puzzle. So TikTok will allow me to speak on, I guess, if I can prove I'm not, after an hour, I'm not a robot talking. I'm not a robot talking. I'm not AI. I don't have a script up here that's telling me what to say. This is just the kindness of my Lama. Very, very kind. So I think one thing that's important, we have to mature our mind in stages, and we have to not be deceptive with ourselves. Here it says that, once I become a vessel that's worthy, it's talking about Tantrayana. Once I've practiced the common paths and have bodhicitta and really, really, have become this worthy vessel of Tantrayana, may I practice it, and may I know with genuine certainty the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and vows most pure. Tantrayana is an excuse to misbehave, is not an excuse to misbehave. Tantrayana, you have to keep the purest ethical behavior possible. And this is something that's become distorted in the teachings. This is something that people have seemed to have like gotten away from. And because as Jeffrey Hopkins said to us, that during these degenerate times, everybody's into Tantra, but Tantrayana is not for degenerate people, not for people whose vows and morality are degenerate. This isn't a quick-paced way for those people with lots of attachment to make it. I've just heard some really, really unrealistic, crazy things being presented recently that, oh, well, this is really what's good for us because we're all really, really attached and we have so much desire and we should just kind of lean into it. Good luck leaning into your desire and having your mind evolve. Good luck if you haven't set the foundation of the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity and learned about death and impermanence and karma and its results and refuge and recognizing how weak we are and how ill we are, not ego-filled and fun we are, how ill we are. If you haven't recognized that you're ill, rely on a remedy. As it says, we have to recognize that the Buddha is a doctor treating an ill person. That ill person's me. I'm ill. I have the self-grasping ignorance that I'm just kept bound by, and everything's concealed by in my life. So anyway, we have to follow these stages. Unfortunately, there's not this quick shortcut, but once we follow the stages, there's a quick shortcut. There's just not a quick shortcut until we have the foundation. But once we get the foundation and can engage in Tantrayana, it's like taking a rocket somewhere as opposed to a bicycle. But if you don't learn how to use the varying vehicles that get you to the tantric vehicle rocket, like you don't learn how to crawl and then walk and then ride a tricycle and then ride a bicycle with training wheels and then ride a bicycle and then ride a dirt bike, and then maybe, drive a little car and then drive a faster car and then drive a Lamborghini and then maybe drive like a helicopter or a small propeller plane. You're just going to be a baby and get in a jet, in a rocket and say, okay, man, the controls. It doesn't even sound like it. That just sounds so stupid, but it's what we're thinking we can do every day when we think that there's some shortcut to our spiritual wellness. Since beginningless time, our mind has been confused, but there's some shortcut that's going to get us unconfused in this life. You don't think that we tried shortcuts before? You don't think that we were like anxious to get somewhere quicker than we could before? So we tried things that weren't realistic? Of course we did. And that's why our minds tell us we can do it now, because we've habituated our minds in the past with unrealistic thinking. We have so much to undo. We don't just have to undo these ideas of self-grasping ignorance. We have to undo the idea that we have to undo the idea that suffering is that we. Let me start this over. We have to undo the idea that things that we think are happiness are not. They're suffering. We have to undo the idea that things that we think are permanent are not. They're impermanent. We have to undo the idea that things that we think are so clean and wonderful are not. They're impure. We have to undo the idea that the self has a selfhood, because it doesn't. It's selfless. We have all of these ideas, and when I'm talking about that in terms of the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths, that selflessness I'm talking to hasn't even gotten us to emptiness yet. And we have all these wrong ideas that we have to get rid of, all these abandonments, and we haven't even gotten to emptiness in terms of the final view. So when we look at the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths and what was taught in the selflessness there, it's that Vaibhashika Sautrantika target audience. And that is not the emptiness of inherent existence. There's so much to learn. So much to learn. So we're in the Mahayana section. So we've been learning about things like equanimity, where we came to the conclusion that, and there was just two things I want to share. And I see we have 18 minutes left. So one thing that's very interesting about equanimity. So equanimity, we came to the conclusion is we started with neutral beings. And then we started with neutral beings, then we moved on to friends, and then we moved on to difficult beings, and we saw our mind's reaction to those varying types of beings. And then we applied the understanding of the uncertainty of kind of rebirth that we find in the medium scope section in the first of the 6 types of suffering, this uncertainty of samsara. And we applied this reasoning of the uncertainty of samsara to our friends, enemies, and neutrals, and applied the reasoning of a continuum of rebirths to that concept to see that there is no certainty in any of those types of positions. And we try to come to the conclusion where we would be equally willing to benefit those 3 types of beings. Now, something that's interesting, a lot of times when equanimity is taught, you kind of come to this conclusion that, man, I've just got to kind of just be like, duh, everybody's the same. There's no bad, there's no good, there's no one I don't know. You're supposed to come to this conclusion, and Buddha never said to just do things that are illogical. The conclusion you're coming to is very interesting, and I want to read this because I've read it 1,000 times and then read it today and thought, someone rewrote my Lam Rinpoche again. Somebody keeps sneaking in and putting stuff in I didn't see before, and I couldn't because I missed it, because I have perfect retention. They must be adding stuff to my book. So here, when we have this non-bias attitude that's created, that must be there, that serves as the foundation for us to recognize that next step that we've been talking about, that all sentient beings are our mother. This equanimity that we're talking about is interesting. It says in the context, so this is the Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, right at this end section of impartiality towards living beings in this 2nd volume. So in this context, your contemplation requires you to make the distinction between friend and enemy. So this whole meditation is founded on these different types of beings that do exist. There are beings that are going to be difficult towards you, and there will be beings who are going to be totally helpful towards you. You're not just being like, oh, they're all the same. Later meditations, you come to see how difficult beings help you, but that's not the gig here. You're just identifying those beings and seeing how your mind reacts. It says it's not the notion of friend or enemy that you need to stop. That's wild, right? That's not the problem. It's not the dealing with reality that there's some difficult people and then there's some good people and so forth. It's not that notion. You would think it's that notion, like I've got to just put everybody at this kind of blank spot, and I can't perceive reality as it is. Nope, I'm just not going to deal with reality at all. The Buddha would never say to do that. When we're talking about equanimity and getting an equal willingness to benefit, Lama Tsongkhapa says this: it's not the notion of friend or enemy you need to stop, but the bias that comes from attachment and hostility, which are based on the reason that some people are friends and others are enemies. So you need to stop using the excuse that you're biased towards others because some people are friends and some people are enemies. Because if you look at the continuum of rebirth, you found that these things can quickly change, and everybody's had every single relationship with you possible when you look at beginningless lives. So you're not trying to stop this idea that, oh, this person's difficult, that person's easy. You're trying to stop your willingness to be beneficial to them. You would be, according to Panchen Sonandrapa, this equanimity is an equal willingness to be beneficial to them. This, no matter who walks in the room, that's a difficult person. I'm equally willing to benefit you as I am my friend. This person that I have loved so much and have so much attachment for, I'm now recognizing that unrealistic way of thinking doesn't make sense, and that I'm equally willing to benefit everyone. So when a difficult person walks in the room and I'm next to the person I love more than anything in the universe, I can see that's a difficult person. This is a person I, would conventionally say I love more than anyone in the universe. but in terms of conventional relationships, but those conventional real relationships don't give me any reason to have a bias. That's super profound. That I'm going to read it again. It's not the notion of friend or enemy that you need to stop, but the bias that comes from attachment and hostility, which are based on the reason. So bias is based on the reason that some people are friends and others are enemies. So your excuse for having bias is that some people are difficult and some people are easy on you. Some people say things you don't like. Some people say things you like. And that's your reason why you have bias. It doesn't even sound right. That's my reason. Some people say things I like. Some people say things I don't like. And that's the reason I have bias. It doesn't even sound right without philosophy. You don't even need to add reasoning and signs and beginningless lives. It just sounds like kind of silly when you say it in that way. I'm using this fact that these are my friends and that is the reason why I'm biased. So it's just something that we need to look at in our own minds and see where we arrive at. And this equanimity, when it arises, it's something that isn't light, apparently. It's something that is a very strong kind of point that you arrive at in your mind, that is very, very profound. It says, after in the Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, it says, if after contemplating these points you succeed in developing even-mindedness towards these three objects of enemy, friend, and neutral person, then you should shift your focus to include everyone in the universe. With them as your meditation object, once again try to develop the same feeling of even-mindedness. After gaining even-mindedness towards all sentient beings, you will no longer discriminate between friends and enemies. So there won't be the discrimination that's taking place when someone's difficult or friendly towards you in terms of your bias. You will be equally, this will completely stop you from engaging in the inferior worldly activity of trying to defeat enemies and promote the well-being of friends. All of those who fail to develop such even-mindedness face this consequence. No one who singles out and excludes certain individuals from the general category of all sentient beings and then refuses to feel any concern for them will ever succeed in generating the true enlightened mind. Bodhicitta. No one. So I guess it's pretty important if we try to work with his friends, enemies, and neutrals and develop equanimity, because no one who has bias has ever even gotten bodhicitta, which means no one with bias has ever become a Buddha, because without bodhicitta, you can't become a Buddha, because bodhicitta is the door to the Mahayana. So we know that that's the foundation. So we've looked at that pretty thoroughly. And then we looked at the first step of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, recognizing that all sentient beings are our mothers, and used a plethora of signs and reasonings to prove that, looking at texts ranging from Buddha Shakyamuni's descent into the Lanka Sutra to Arya Sanga's levels of yogic deeds, to Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, to the third Dalai Lama's essence of refined gold, to the first Panchen Lama, Panchen Losang Chuji Jetsun, or fourth, depending on you count them, is a easy path, and the second Panchen Lama or fifth Panchen Lama, depending on how you count them, Panchen Losang Yeshe's swift path. We've looked at the signs and syllogisms that are presented within the swift path to get us to come to this conclusion that sentient beings are our mother. And we've really, hopefully, done a good job at reinforcing that this isn't just something that we just believe like a pie in the sky. It's something that we evolve our minds into believing using logic and discover these things ourselves. The Buddha didn't make anything up. He discovered what was already true. We're just trying, we don't know what's true. We're just trying to discover more and more and more and more truth till we discover the final truth of being able to understand reality and diversity simultaneously. So This will happen to all of us, and we're so fortunate that we have these texts that we've gone through just to look at that one point. When we look at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, we know that was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Arya Sangha. And when we do the merit field, we say from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Arya Sangha and Master Vasubandhu. We're talking about the beings who passed this practice to us. This is what we're talking about when we say, may I connect with these teachings. This is why we invoke the merit field. This teaching I'm talking to you about right now went from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga, through Vasubandhu, down through that lineage, through Lama Salingpa and Lord Atisha and Master Drone Tompa, and through all the lamas to us, to land in our laps, to be spoon-fed to us. Look at how many commentaries I had in English and sutra I had in English, and the authentic Indian commentaries I have in English to be able to read, to reinforce our understanding of beginningless lives, to reinforce this understanding that today's mind is a continuum of yesterday's mind, and yesterday's mind is a continuation of the mind from the day before yesterday. This chain can be traced all the way back to the mind that existed at the moment of a person's conception in his mother's womb. But the mind at that moment of conception must be in the continuation of a mind that existed just prior to the moment of conception, because the mind that becomes established in the womb at conception is part of a mind continuum that existed before the moment of conception in the womb. And since samsara has no beginning, there is no event we can point to and say, this is when my mind first came into being. And in dependence upon that logic and reasoning, and recognizing that our mind is beginningless and there's no being that we haven't had a relationship with, and that there's no being that hasn't been our mother when we've been born from an egg or from the womb, and that we've had these beginningless rebirths time and time again, and there's no place that we haven't been born. When we start to look at the signs and reasoning that establish that, then we're getting to the place where we can actually come to the conclusion that every single sentient being in the universe is our mother. This continuum has been a basis of consciousness, and continuum of sense powers and continuums of breaths and so forth has been the basis of designation for I. The I, who are you? Who is Jeff? I am. Who would have called out if when you said, who is Pete 10 lives ago, if my name was Pete, I would have said, I am. So that I has all sentient beings as its mother. That I, all sentient beings, are that I's mother. That makes sense. That's the logic kind of thinking. All sentient beings are that I mother. Who's the I? The I merely imputed in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation. Who was the I? Who am I now? Jeff. Who was I before? I don't know. I don't have clairvoyance. I will eventually, and I'll know. Who will I be in the future? Well, the Jeff that was a moment ago doesn't exist anymore, because this Jeff, this person, only exists in time. This concept of Jeff is merely existing in time. And this moment's Jeff is giving rise to a next moment's Jeff. And this moment's Jeff ceases when next moment's Jeff arises. So previous moment's Jeff doesn't exist except as a continuum. A minute ago's Jeff doesn't exist any more than 1,000 lifetimes ago Jeff. But both of them exist in terms of previous moments of the I. Jeff's previous moments. Logic's funny like that. So these are the things that we establish, and these are the ways that we establish it. We don't rely upon blind faith. We don't rely upon history to dictate whether or not it's true. Well, this is the first teaching the Buddha gave. No, this was the first teaching the Buddha gave. Well, this one was found here. This one was found there. If someone thinks something is true, and then a valid cognition comes along and invalidates it, that thing they said was true wasn't. It just hadn't been opposed yet. by actual valid cognition to disprove its accuracy. So we can't rely upon, the Buddha said, take my teachings, cut and rub, and check them for accuracy, and then say I'm the teacher. And then Arya Nagarjuna showed very clearly, and Shantideva shows very clearly how these things are realistic pronouncements of Lord Buddha and the final teaching of Lord Buddha by showing logically that the Buddha was omniscient, the Buddha knew all, and the Buddha wouldn't be able to be undone by some logic. So when we look at the cradle of our afflictions, our gross afflictions, we see that it's self-grasping ignorance, ignorance that grasps at things, person, and phenomena as being inherently existent. And just dealing with this I, you know, and not dealing with it in its full way, in dependence upon what it's designated on, hands and stuff that are phenomena, without dealing with the hands and finding their emptiness, this self of person will never be eradicated. If there's grasping at the aggregates, there's grasping at the person. Nagarjuna, Precious Garland, Master Nagarjuna. You look it up and you see if that reasoning makes sense. Oh, I can see I don't have autonomous substantial existence. My hand is inherently existent. This is mine. Now I've got the self of person again. Okay, so that's what I have to say this evening. I didn't get to everything I wanted to say, but I just want to reinforce. There's a lot of people saying a lot of things, and a lot of people who can say things much more philosophically intact than I can, who are much more learned than I am. But the little pieces of practice and practical information that I can bring to you, whether it's in a special order or not, is what I come to bring to the table. And that's just what I've learned in 30 years of studying this stuff and come to find has been useful, and what I find isn't useful. And I've spent, most days of my life in those periods looking at Buddhism in one way or another, sometimes intensively, other times more lackadaisically. But I can say that all of those days, since I really, really got into this, which it was right away when I found Buddhism, I've really devoted to some sort of development. And I've failed miserably many times, and I've gotten ahead of myself many times, but I've also then been grounded by the teachings because I had them available and kept studying them, and knew to slow down or to speed up, what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And that only comes from the scriptures and the teachings. Okay, so I think the fundamental ground may be scented with something. So let's do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Thank you for your patient listening. Sorry I went a little bit over this evening. And yeah, we'll see each other next time. And maybe the seconds I went over, I said something that was helpful for you. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losondrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Okay, and any mistakes I've made, may they be purified by the Vajrasattva mantra. Om Bensasato Samayam and Palaya Bensasato Sino Vajita Dida Meva Zudaga Meva Zubaga Meva Meva Savazini Mebra Jasava comes to Jamaican Shriam Kurum Ha Bhagavan Savatata Kato Benzamo Moka Benzabava Maha Safa Ahum Be. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama Jorama 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 Dijigala Rajamo Rama Jinja Hong Jo Hong. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. And then a supplication to Namgyo Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche to please return and keep me in mind, keep us in mind when, we will be able to meet again. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food and music purified by Om Ahom, Om Ahom, Om Ahom. The purity, the rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that you'll put these teachings into practice and find them as helpful as I have over the years. And yeah, keep your minds virtuous and throw in those virtuous imprints in there, and we'll all eventually never have to suffer again and be the most reliable guides in the universe. Thank you. Appreciate you all.